Hello. In this video, I will demonstrate how we can enable Azure Arc in environments where no outbound connections are allowed from servers to the internet. We can accomplish this with a new feature currently in public preview called the Azure Arc Gateway, and also leveraging a proxy, or rather a forward proxy, that we can configure our Azure Arc agent to talk through so that all of the communication can traverse over a private link and securely over that private link from the on-premises network to an Azure virtual network, and then to the needed public URLs which exist within the Azure backbone. And so in the blog, I have this illustration, and this is from the documentation slightly modified, which shows on the left my on-premises network with servers in it, which may not be able to talk to any outbound or any direct or even indirectly to anything on the outside public internet, but still have a need to and want to use Arc. Now, of course, Arc requires several different public endpoints to be used depending on what extensions you install on it, as well as for the Arc agent itself to connect and to report in and report metadata, etc. And so if we combine the two features, the new preview of this Arc Gateway resource, as well as the using a proxy, and importantly, putting that proxy strategically in Azure already, that is in a VNet, which has this connection, this express route or a VPN between that private secured network towards that private VNet. We can have all of that traffic that Arc needs to communicate to those public endpoints traverse that, and then have the enterprise proxy handle allowing the specific 7 non-wildcard endpoints it needs to be able to function. So the URL that gets created for the Arc Gateway, the hybrid identity service, that GBL, HIS link, the Entra ID and ARM traffic, etc., and also the various extensions that you may choose to use through Arc. And so what this looks like is the following. So in my Azure Arc stuff within my subscription, there's this new management feature for the Azure Arc Gateway. Now, I've already created one. Essentially, if you create an Azure Arc Gateway, it's going to ask for the usual things: give it a name, give it a resource group, which region do you want this thing to reside in. In my case, I'm going to use East US 2 because that's where I've decided to put most all of my Azure things for my particular environment. And not much to this. When you create it, it essentially will yield this unique URL. So this gateway URL, and this is what we will need to configure the proxy with to allow access to, that is outbound access to this URL plus those 6 other URLs. And so again, I have the link in the blog, but this is the Arc Gateway documentation. There's that description here of that diagram. And here are the explanations of those URLs. And again, there's 7 and only 7 that we need here to allow Arc now to function without any direct access to those public endpoints out on the internet. Okay, so now that I've got my gateway up and I've got this configured, if I go back to my Azure things, to my machines, you can see I've already got some machines here. To simulate this for this lab, I have the following. So in my environment, I just have a Hyper-V server here that's hosting, kind of simulating a private network with various machines on it. Notice that all of these machines are connected except for this new one we have called Secured Host. And so if I look at Secured Host, if I go over to it and connect to it, let me minimize that, you can see that Secured Host absolutely cannot hook to anything, right? If I try to go to Google.com, MSN.com, it's not allowed because, well, it's actually restricted. And so so I want to Arc enable this machine, and so how do we do that? Well, I have created a proxy, and I'll show you that here in a second, which this server can talk to. It is allowed to talk to it, but it can't talk to anything directly that is in the public internet on the outbound side. And so what we can do is create the necessary script to do the onboarding. And so what I did prior to this call or this recording is I've already done that work. So if you've ever gone into Azure Arc and you've said, hey, I want to add a resource, there's this nifty add machine dialog that allows you to generate this script. So again, it asks you now for proxy server, but the new thing is you can have it ask for the Arc gateway. So essentially, I can give it a proxy server URL, but I can also give it that gateway, which I've already created. Now, I've already done all of that. So if I go back to my lab environment, and I go to my, again, this is my machine, my secured host that is yet to be onboarded. And here's that script that the portal produced, right? And this is pretty standard stuff. This is basically just generated by that portal experience of creating the script. So in my case, it creates a script using a specific SPN that I've created that has access to onboard things. And then it starts using things like my proxy. So my proxy is at this 10.10.1.104 address. It reaches out to download the bits to get it down, and then it goes on and does this connect statement once the install is successful, and some of the new parameters such as, hey, use my gateway ID. So use that gateway object, that Arc GW1 in my case, use that URL to talk through that, as well as use that proxy to talk through that as well. And so what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and kick that off. Now, while that's going, if I go back, I can show you in my example, I'm just using a simple Squid proxy as my proxy server. And in the Squid proxy, it's got a relatively simple configuration. So this is the comp file. Basically, I just created this ACL called Arc URLs, and I put in the destination domain the 7 URLs, the public endpoints that needs to talk to. So there's that special one that gets created when you create that gateway, and then the others: login, Microsoft.com, GBL, HIS, Arc, etc. So those are the only ones that are allowed through that proxy. Now remember, if we strategically place that proxy on the VNet, then that means those private networks on that private network will traverse the private express route VPN to this proxy server, and then out from that proxy it will go, or only allowed to go to these 7 non-wildcard URLs, and notice that nothing else is allowed. So access Arc URLs, but access deny all otherwise. Okay, so hopefully I've stalled long enough and it's given ample time for this to bake. It looks good here. Looks like back on my secured server, it ran successfully through my script. I can see through some of the logging here that it looks like it connected. It's configured to use the Arc gateway, etc. And so what I can do now is look over at my portal, bring that back up. And let's go to Arc, let's go to machines. And so now I do have this secured host. And so here's my secured host that has 0 access outbound towards the public internet, yet I'm able to connect. And again, if I refer back to my diagram here, you can see that it's essentially going to traverse through my proxy using that gateway. And really the point I'm trying to drive home here is, sure, we're still using public endpoints. We got to use 7 of them, but we only need 7, no wildcards, but just 7 explicit URLs. And the other thing is those URLs point back to things that are in the Azure backbone. So there is no traversing of the internet whatsoever in this case, because everything goes from on-prem through the express route, through the or VPN, and towards the proxy. And then from there, it stays well within the protected Azure backbone environment that we have set up. And that's all I had. Thanks for listening.